Joining me now is our own managing editor, Jonathan Larsen. He is at TYT Investigates. That's the objective reporting arm of the Young Turks. Jonathan, I want to talk to you about a couple of stories that are coming out and have come out. One's about Buttigieg. Before we go to Klobuchar on the prayer breakfast, let's talk about this one. So The Root is coming out with a story about Buttigieg. What can you tell us about it, and how do we work with them on it?
Production between TYT and The Root. It'll be published at tyt.com tomorrow, if everything works out, and as well as on The Root. And essentially what happened was a source in South Bend provided me with some documents, and I was looking into them, and the source told me that they had heard that Mike Harriet of The Root had also come into possession of these documents. And so I reached out to Mike, who you may remember sort of had a moment of fame there when he wrote a piece for The Root saying Pete Buttigieg is a lying MF. He then got an interview with Buttigieg, all of this stuff. So I asked him, hey, I've heard you've got these documents too. You want to work together? And he said, yeah, so we did.
It's funny what the different people's reactions are. Because if you had called Buttigieg a lying MF, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have given you an interview. But
I've been asking for an interview since April, so maybe I've been going about it wrong.
Right, but I love Mike's work, and I'm glad he did that piece because it wasn't about the curse. It was the substance of what he wrote in that piece that was challenging a Buttigieg in exactly the right way. And I've actually read the story that's going to come out tomorrow, and it is a doozy. So please, everybody, check out tyt.com and The Root for that story coming out about Buttigieg and honestly about African Americans and law enforcement in South Bend. It's amazing. The fact that the mainstream media is not covering it is astounding. I mean, I'll ask you one more thing about that, and then we'll move on to Klobuchar. Jonathan, how do you think the mainstream media would have covered it if you or anyone else had broken a story about when Bernie Sanders, as mayor of Burlington, had demoted the black police chief, and there were cops on tape who were saying, we got to Bernie's donors and got him to get rid of the black police chief so that white people can be in charge. How do you think the press might have reacted to that one?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are, you can possibly defend it if they don't trust TYT, if they're not used to the fact that we are now doing original reporting by the same rules, if not better than the ones that give us the content at the AP and the New York Times. Maybe that's the best defense you can offer, but that's not a good one because it's pretty easy, right? You can just go to the Buttigieg folks and say, hey, is this reporting true or not?
Yeah, it's the bare minimum. Or you might actually go to South Bend and find out for yourself if it's true or not.
Well, actually, some of them have tried. I've been told by my sources that some of them have gone to South Bend, and for whatever reason, they haven't been able to come up with the same stuff, or they have decided not to go with it. I don't know.
Yeah, fairly convenient, it appears to me, but that's my opinion. All right, let's go back to your reporting. So story out about Amy Klobuchar on the National Prayer Breakfast. So she hasn't exactly dropped out, has she? What has she done with the National Prayer Breakfast?
So every year, the National Prayer Breakfast sends out an invitation on, essentially, it looks like congressional letterhead, and you see all the members of the House and all the members of the Senate and the two co-chairs from Congress who are inviting you, whoever you might be, Russian or otherwise, to the National Prayer Breakfast. And it's typically the people who are at the heart of, closest to the Fellowship Foundation, AKA the family, who show up on this letterhead. We saw last year's letterhead. Amy Klobuchar was there. She's been a participant in the breakfast before. This year, we actually asked the TYT Army for help to identify who was going this year. We were using hashtag Democrats and the Family, and we got a tip. We followed it up. The Fellowship Foundation confirmed that the letterhead that we found was accurate. Klobuchar is not on it. Does that mean she's not going? Does that mean she's not participating in some way? We don't know. She didn't answer.
But she has clearly taken some action to take herself off that letterhead.
Well, it's hard without knowing the process. The Fellowship Foundation didn't exactly explain it either. Is there some other reason she's not on other than wanting to distance herself? We don't know. But we did find out by comparing that the number of Democrats compared to Republicans, there's a greater disparity this year than we've seen in the past. And a number of Democrats are gone, and a fair amount of the number who are new to the list are fairly new to Congress as well. So it's, and there's not, I should note also, a lot of progressives there. And last year, as you recall, Ro Khanna and Ted Lieu, both progressive members of the House, told us that, at least in part in response to our reporting, they had some questions about the breakfast and the Fellowship Foundation's involvement, and they were not inclined to go. So whether that trend is continuing, whether other people are starting to pay attention to our reporting, to the Netflix documentary, to the FBI findings about what went on with the Russians, we don't know.
All right, so I want to get to one of the financiers of this group in a second, because that's a really interesting part of the story and connects to some of the Democrats. But first, look, my opinion is that this is an extremist group, and Democrats that go to it are aiding and abetting this group, and they shouldn't. There's plenty of other places to get breakfast in DC. But let's talk about the facts here. What are the concerns about the prayer breakfast group?
So the concerns go back quite a ways. President Obama got some heat from LGBTQ groups and allies for speaking to the Fellowship Foundation's breakfast, because there was some reported involvement with anti-gay legislation in Uganda. And when I say anti-gay, I mean death penalty anti-gay. So that was one thing. More recently, the FBI reported that the family, a leader in the family, they didn't name him, but we found out who it was, essentially handed Maria Butina and Alexander Torshin, Russian operatives, tickets to the National Prayer Breakfast, which we now know, thanks to the FBI, the Russians were hoping to use to exploit the connections that they can make there to influence US policy, to network and make connections that would benefit them. And we also found, TYT reported, that the Fellowship Foundation sponsored congressional travel to Europe that included meetings with anti-gay leaders and anti-Semitic leaders. And the other thing we reported was that not only did the Fellowship give tickets to Russians, we found through tax returns that an affiliated group which was connected with the same leader that the FBI identified without naming, same guy was involved there. That group reported expenses related to Russian attendance, meaning that someone somewhere decided to spend some money to bring the Russians there. Where that money came from, who made that decision and why, again, we still don't know. And that was part of what Ro Khanna and Ted Lieu were concerned about, was without knowing more, we don't know exactly what we're participating in. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist of some of the concerns.
It was always insane for the Democrats to participate in this obvious right-wing group. So, we're just having prayer together. No, they're sending people to go execute gay people in Uganda. It's absolutely outrageous, let alone all the other places they're going to try to pass anti-LGBTQ legislation. That's before we even found out. I was gonna say about the Russian infiltration, but it wasn't much of an infiltration, because of your reporting we find out, no, they were actually invited in and paid for to some degree. And so they could not only influence Republicans, but Democrats, which then leads me to the question of, why are the Democrats doing this? And I noticed in your latest story that there's a Delaware poultry magnate, Ron Cameron, who finances this breakfast and this group. And look at that, the two biggest Democrats still involved are Chris Coons and Tom Carper, senators from Delaware. What an amazing coincidence.
Yeah, well, the Ron Cameron, as others reported first, is a poultry billionaire. He's also very close to Donald Trump. He's spent at least close enough to have spent the 2018 midterms election eve watching the returns at the White House with Trump. He gives to Republicans all over the country, but not in Delaware. In Delaware, Coons and Carper have been left alone, and What that means, we don't know.
Yeah, no, I know. Your job's to report the facts. My job's to interpret them. Well, look at that. There's 2 Democrats that Ron Cameron has decided that he is not going to spend money against. In a sense, that's a form of bribery. You could just give to the Republicans as he does, or you could withhold from Republicans in Delaware, kind of a protection racket from this chicken hawk, if you will. And lo and behold, Coons and Carper wind up cheerleading for your extremist right-wing group. Funny how that turns out. Look, there are still several other Democrats that are on the letterhead. Generally speaking, who are they?
So as I mentioned earlier, that a fair number of them are new to Congress, and a fair number of them are conservative Democrats. There are we lost a bunch from last year's invitation, but this year's new Democrats from the Senate anyway, because there are fewer there, Tim Kaine, Joe Manchin, and Doug Jones.
Joe Manchin, really?
Right. Right. And look, to your point about we've always known they were right wing, all of this, the former leader, Doug Coe, made a point of reaching out to Democrats, right? Gore, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, these people had relationships and connections with Coe. How true that is now, it's unclear because it's also not a monolith. The organization is not a monolith. And to some extent, there are indications that there are tensions within the group of what it should be and how it should conduct itself in the future, both around the breakfast and obviously in its other activities as well. And to your point about Democrats participating or not participating, do you mind if I bring up Jess Scarane, or were you going to bring her up?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so after our story went up yesterday, Jess Scarane is a progressive candidate who is primarying Chris Coons in Delaware for the Senate seat. And she retweeted the article and she said, I'm quoting her tweet now, most Democrats are clearly distancing themselves from the National Prayer Breakfast, rightfully so, since it sponsors sanction homophobia and bigotry. So why does @Chris Coons still proudly support this event?
By the way, Chris Coons also one of the biggest surrogates for Joe Biden. But God forbid the national media should ask him about that either. Okay, but we do reporting at TYT, and Jonathan is among the folks who do it, thanks to you guys. So TYT.com, the Klobuchar story and the prayer breakfast story is out today. And then the big Buttigieg story drops tomorrow, so everybody check that out as well. Jonathan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, and if I could take a second, if the TYT Army wants to get in touch with their representatives and ask them, are you planning to attend? Are you planning to participate in this year's National Prayer Breakfast? Use the hashtag Democrats in the Family on Twitter. Let us know.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.